Assalamualaikum and good morning to everyone. Today we will present about subtopic 4 in chapter 5, which is general precaution in acquiring and storing hazardous chemical. Corrosives are one of the most encountered hazards in the laboratory. As you can see the spinning sign in the upper right corner of the slide, that is the hazard pictogram for corrosive chemical. So, what is actually corrosive chemical? Corrosive chemical in the form of solid, liquid and gases are chemicals that cause visible damage or permanent changes to body tissue by chemical action at the site of contact as well as destruction to other materials. Corrosive effect can occur not only to the skin and eyes but also to the respiratory tract through inhalation and to the gastrointestinal tract through ingestion. A highly corrosive chemical consists of pH below than 2.0 and above 12.5. Solution of strong acid and bases at the concentration greater than 1 molar are also considered as corrosive chemicals. Next, there are three major classes of corrosive chemicals, which are strong acid and bases, dehydrating agents, and oxidizing agents. If you look at the table, there are a few examples of chemicals being stated for each class. For acquisition and storage, first corrosive solid. It must be stored in the area that are dry and cool, out of direct sunlight and away from steam pipe, boilers or other sources of heat. Second, corrosive liquid. It must be stored in a chemical cabinet such as non-metallic or epoxy painted cabinet. For concentrated liquid, it must be kept in secondary containment, which is safety coated bottles. Do not store corrosive liquid above eye level or more than 5 feet. Third, corrosive gases. It must be stored in vented cabinet or inside a fume hood. Close regulators and valve when the cylinders are not in use. Flush with dry air or nitrogen after use. Corrosive chemicals are dangerous, right? So, how to handle this chemical but at the same time avoiding hazard from happen? The solution are using PPE and engineering control. For PPE, which is personal protective equipment, the function of PPE is to avoid chemical spillage direct onto the skin or eyes. First, it is needed to wear safety glasses or chemical goggles when handling corrosive chemicals. Face shield must be worn if needed. Second, hand protection. It is a must to wear gloves when handling corrosive chemical. For example, nitrile chemical resistant glove. Third, skin and body protection. Long pants or clothing that covers the body to the ankles, lab coat and closed shoes must be worn when handling these chemicals. For engineering controls, fume hood can be used to provide protection against toxic fume, vapors and dust. Then, regular inspection. First, the person in charge needs to make sure that containers of corrosive chemicals are closed tightly. Second, he or she needs to check for leaking containers. Third, check the label of containers. Make sure all are properly labeled and can be read. Fourth, check for emergency shower and eye wash. Make sure both of it are functioning well.
What is a flammable gases? Flammable gases come in a wide variety, but they all got that one common denominator in which flammable gas will burn when they mix with air or oxygen, and it's provided with a source of ignition. Examples of flammable gases are propane, hydrogen, butane, methane, ethylene, and etc. Purchase a compressed gases in a returnable cylinders if available. If non-return cylinders are the only alternative, be prepared to pay for the cost of disposal because it contains highly toxic or reactive gas. Therefore, it can be very expensive. Storing a flammable gas needs more precautions than regular gas types. It is very essential to store this gas safely and correctly, in which it should be stored in a cool, closable and dark area. Next, keep the cylinders away from any form of heat, sparks, flames or hot surfaces at all costs. In other words, the area where you store the flammable gas must be ventilated and cool. Of all the dangerous chemical gases, chlorine trifluoride is known to be the most flammable due to its ability to burn without any ignition source, giving it the ability to exceed the oxidizing power of oxygen. The only known way to store the chlorine trifluoride safely is to put it inside of a sealed container made of steel, iron, nickel or copper, which are able to contain the chemical safely if they are first treated with fluorine gas. Regular inspection that should be taken is that if the cylinder is more than 10 years past its time date, the cylinder cannot be refilled. Do not attempt to refill dented, damaged or corroded cylinders. They must be returned to a test station for recertification. The definition of flammable liquid is, it is a combustible liquid which can be easily ignited in air at ambient temperature. A liquid with a flash point of under 100 degrees Fahrenheit is considered flammable. Flammable liquids are responsible for the majority of fires and injuries in the workplace. The examples of flammable liquids are gasoline, alcohols, and etc. It should be noted that you shouldn't purchase the flammable liquids more than what you need. Keep the quantities to a minimum that you will use in a 30 days period. Improperly stocked flammable liquids will give a threat to our health, safety, and also the nearby environment and property. Therefore, store it in a tanks or closed containers. Next, keep it in a secure flammable storage cabinets while they are not in use. Safety cabinets and all hazards control measures must be regularly inspected, reviewed, maintained to meet the requirements. Make sure that the labels are intact, legible, and have not been altered or defaced in any way. Also, containers must have lids and are fully closed when are not in use. Next, cabinet must be set on a solid ground and is perfectly level so it won't fall down anytime. Lastly, there must be no evidence of smoking, hot work, or other restricted activities within 3 meters of the cabinet.
Flammable solid is a solid which is readily combustible or may cause or contribute to fire through friction. Flammable solids are less easily spilled than liquids and usually safer to handle. However, finely powdered flammable solid may form an explosive mixture if dispersed in air. Furthermore, if heated or involved in a fire, flammable solid may melt into flammable liquids. For example, there are phosphorus, yellow calcium carbide, picric acid, and benzoyl peroxide. So we're moving on to acquisition and storage. My first point is purchase the most stable chemical that will do the job. Then, ensure Class D extinguishers shall be easily accessible in flammable storage and work areas. Next, keep a container of sand near the work area because sand can usually be used to smother a fire involving flammable solid. My fourth point is, if a flammable water reactive solid is spilled onto skin, brush off as much as possible, then flush with copious amount of water. Then, store in separate dry, cool area away from oxidizer, corrosive, flammable liquid. Next, for regular inspection, first, glove must be inspected. Second, portable chemical containers are properly labeled and bear the appropriate warning sign or hazard statement. Next, date the corrective action was implemented. Toxic materials are substances that may cause serious harm to an individual if it enters the body. For example, they have formaldehyde, mercury, lead, asbestos, hazardous or toxic air pollutant. Now for acquisition and storage. First, when to purchase, it must require special storage, such as in a dry box, refrigerator, or a freezer. Next, transportation of chemical within the facility, whether by internal staff or outside delivery personnel, it must be done safely. My third point is keep the amount of toxic material in storage as small as possible. Furthermore, ensure that containers are tightly closed when not in use and when empty. Keep empty containers in a separate storage area because empty containers may contain hazardous toxic residue. Next, store material within the temperature range recommended by the chemical manufacturer or supplier. For regular inspection, first, unwanted and out-of-date chemicals should be disposed of safely. Second, regular inspection of safety equipment such as eye washers and safety showers must be carried out. And the last one is individual chemical containers should be inspected to ensure they are not leaking or damaged in any way.
What are harmful chemicals? Harmful chemicals is any chemical which presents in either gas, liquid or solid form that has the potential to cause harm to the persons and also the environment. So the example of harmful chemical that we usually use is paint. So in paint it contains xylene and also toluene. So these two substances are a volatile organic compound, which these volatile organic compound are in the harmful chemicals. So other examples, it can be cleaning chemical, liquefied petroleum gas, diesels and fuels, and many others. So next, we proceed on the acquisitions of these chemicals. So during the transportation of this chemical, it needs to avoid mixed class of hazardous chemical and needs to follow the regulations of circulations. And this chemical need to be prepared by a well-trained persons in order to avoid any accidents or incidents to occur. And this chemical also need to keep away from water, food or other reactive chemical, as it can pose significant risk to health if this chemical penetrates into our body or direct contact with our skin. So for storage, this chemical need to be stored in an appropriate risk control measure and need to put safety signage or placards on the bottles or the container, so that the person that handle this harmful chemical know that this chemical is a harmful. So lastly is regulation inspection is needed using an audit checklist in order to prevent any risk assessment. What are oxidizing chemicals? Oxidizing chemicals are substances that spontaneously evolve oxygens at room temperatures, and it also promotes combustion. So when we talk about promote combustion, we know that these substances are a flammable substance, and this substance also has high exothermic reactions when react with other substance, which the process of releasing energy in the form of heat. So the example of oxidizing chemical is hydrogen peroxide, bromine, sodium perchlorate, and many others. And the classes of this oxidizing chemical is nitrates, chlorates, peroxides, perchlorate, and also permanganate. So for storing of these chemicals, it needs to be stored in a dry area and avoid direct contact with sunlight or any flammable substance. And it needs to be stored in a spill tray, so that if these chemicals spill, it will spill in a spill tray. So for inspections, it needs to maintain a good housekeeping, and regular inspections are needed in order to protect or secure the safety of the workers, and also the safety equipment also need to be inspect regularly.
What is explosive chemical? Explosive chemical are those chemicals which may start reaction spontaneously upon sudden change in temperature and pressure, or under mechanical friction and vibration. The reactions are usually violent and cause the explosion. The example of explosive chemical are: first, certain normally stable perchlorate such as pyridium perchlorate that become unstable at elevated temperature. Next, hydrated picric acid that become contaminated with metal that form metal picric salt. And lastly, organic chemical that form peroxide through exposure to air or light, such as isopropyl ether and chloroprene. Acquisition, storage, and inspection. Firstly, record the opening date and the date that chemical should be discarded on the label of chemical. Next, keep the chemical away from all ignition sources such as open flame, hot surface, spark sources, and direct sunlight. Then, consider designating a special area for explosive chemical use. Store them in an explosive magazine and inspect areas weekly. Lastly, periodically check containers of chemical that could become overpressurized, like highly concentrated formic acid. Explosive chemical need specific storage because peroxide may form in freshly distilled, undistilled, and unstabilized ether, reaching less than 2 weeks. Exposure to light OA enhance the formation of the peroxides. Many ethers tend to absorb and react with oxygen from the air to form unstable peroxide, which may detonate with extreme violence when they become concentrated by evaporation and distillation. This ether may also explode when combined with other compounds that produce a detonable mixture or when disturbed by heat, shock, or friction. Thus, it is preferable to use a small container that can be completely emptied rather than take small amount from a large container over time. Then, ether should be stored in amber bottle and under a blanket of inert gas such as nitrogen or argon to inhibit formation of peroxides. Then, if you see the symbol, it indicates that the chemical is self-reactive and explosive. The last one is carcinogenic substance. Carcinogenic substances are substances that promotes carcinogenesis, the formation of cancer, or in another word, carcinogenic are chemical that can cause cancer. Examples of carcinogenic substances are asbestos, arsenic, benzene, beryllium, vinyl chloride, and many more. For the storage of carcinogenic substance, firstly, we have to record. A separate inventory of carcinogens on hand should be kept in each laboratory. And then, for the location, carcinogens should be stored together, not along with other chemicals. Separate areas should be set aside in the refrigerator or lab or freezer for carcinogen storage. Lastly, transportation of carcinogen. Carcinogen should be transported from lab to lab using a two-container containment system. A paint can will also serve as the second level of containment. Both containers should be covered to prevent a spill should they be dropped. And then, cabinet where chemical carcinogen are being stored must be posted with the sign or label.
So that is all for our presentation. Thank you for your attention.